I kind of fell into this midterm, which is kind of the sweet spot between long-term, and short-term, right? And so it's 30 plus day stays generally. And I love it because we're not dealing with regulations, right? Generally, we're in long-term territory. We're not dealing with this constant turnover. And even if you have a team of cleaners and co-hosts, you're still dealing with just constant turnover, and it's a lot of work. And then cash flow rise, that we're in this for cash flow, right? I love it because I'm getting all the benefits of a rental, but you can, on the scale 2x to 3x your rental income with a very consistent guest. They're high caliber. They're going to stay for a while, right? And maybe you'll have a couple turnovers a year versus every couple days.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Evergreen Marketing Podcast by Carrot.com, where we help you dial in your online marketing so you can build a business of freedom and impact. Hopefully, that's the goal. Today we're talking about something that probably has a lot of misconceptions around it. A lot of investors probably don't fully realize the opportunity, but midterm rentals. I think midterm rentals are awesome. To me, they're super sexy and there's a lot of opportunity there. And so I brought on a friend of Carrot.com who's been with us for years, who is doing this really well. Midterm rentals is her niche and she's crushing it with midterm rentals. And so we're going to talk about the ins and outs so you can figure out how to get into them, if it's the right fit for you, a few tips on how to make them work really well and turn a good profit. And we're going to dive into it. But I want to introduce you to our friend, our 2 times Carrot Camper, where we actually met, Carrot Camp alumni, Shona Lepis. What's up, Shona?
Hey, thank you so much. It's really an honor. I'm absolutely love Carrot. So I'm really excited to do a deep dive into my favorite topic.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a good conversation. So we were just laughing before we hit record. We're going to skip the background for the most part. We're saying Shona runs a podcast too. What is your podcast? Just let people know.
Yeah, thank you. She's got assets.
She's got assets. I love it. You're so good at branding and naming. I love it. But I was like, you know what? We're just going to skip the intro because like everyone that got into real estate, it's the same intro. I was broke and then my friend gave me a copy of Rich Dad, Poor Dad and then my brain exploded, yada, yada, yada. So we'll skip it. But I'll let you do a little bit of background about how you got into midterm rentals. But anyways, let's talk about midterm rentals. Give me your best sales pitch, Shona, on why midterm versus some of the exit strategies? Like what makes you so pumped up about this? And feel free to talk about numbers too.
Okay. So why I love midterms. There's so many things. So I like to start off with like kind of the basics of it. If someone doesn't know what it is, basically, we're in the exit strategies. Like there's long-term, midterm, and short-term, right? Those are kind of like very high level, right? Cash flow profit wise, long-term is very stable, not depending on your market, not the best cash flow. It's very secure.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have short-term, which super sexy. I think it was really popular. I think there's been a lot of regulations that's happened, right? Really high nightly rate, really luxury properties. It's awesome, but there's a lot of turnover. There's high maintenance guests. They're there for a vacation. You can get killed by reviews. Like it's a great niche, but for me, I did that for a while. And then they were not destination properties. And I kind of fell into this midterm, which is kind of the sweet spot between long-term, and short-term, right? And so it's 30 plus day stays generally. And I love it because a lot of reasons. We're not dealing with regulations, right? Generally, we're in long-term territory. We're not dealing with this constant turnover. And if you haven't done like an STR Airbnb, like even if you have a team of cleaners and co-hosts, you're still dealing with just constant turnover and it's a lot of work. And then cash flow rise, that we're in this for cash flow, right? I love it because I'm getting all the benefits of a rental, but and I don't like to throw numbers out there just to like, there's some crazy numbers, right? But I would say you can, on the scale 2x to 3x your rental income with a very consistent guest. They're high caliber. Wow. They're going to stay for a while, right? And maybe you'll have a couple turnovers a year versus every couple days.
Yeah. We'll get into the kind of the weeds of like what the properties are like, but these are furnished, your midterm rentals? They're
fully furnished. So it's kind of like an Airbnb vibe, right? They need to be well designed, they're not vacation style, but fully furnished. It's generally expected that your utilities are included, Wi-Fi and all that stuff. Nicely designed, but it's not luxury. It's not like a hot tub and a fire pit and a game room and the things I think that people are looking for in short term these days.
Yeah. So I got a lot of stuff I want to get through. We'll talk about marketing. We'll talk a little about regulation, the types of properties. So we'll cover all those things for people listening. But I want to know who's renting, like, and is there demand? What's the demand like?
It's a great question. So, who's renting? I think typically people think traveling nurses. Like that's what everyone. This is kind of like there's a
Yeah.
website called Furnish Finder. A lot of people have heard of it, or that's one avatar. It's a great avatar. There, if people don't know, hospitals will hire nurses. It's usually 13-week contracts. They have a stipend. They're there for 13 weeks, right? So they're there for a while. They're a little more budget conscious, but they're going to pay a premium to have a place to come and live for a while, right? That's one avatar. And then on the scale of like that, there's families that have been, say you're a family and you had a pipe burst or a fire, right? I mean, hopefully it doesn't happen to you, but it does happen, right? And you file a claim and then you get put into a hotel generally. But insurance companies, they're not housing companies, right? Like they're not going to find you housing. So they partner
Yeah.
with temporary housing companies, and they are going to help find them housing. And usually you work with them, and that's where the bigger profits come in, right? Because we're talking about sometimes a month or two stay. It's very short term. The insurance is paying for the stays, right? And it's really based on the coverage you have, but napkin math, it's like 20, just to really generalize. And every policy is different. There's no really magical way to know, but it's about 20 to 25% of your home value is what they have annually for additional living expenses.
Are you have you seen a certain mix? Like, are you getting more travel nurses, or do you have like any strategies for getting more of those insurance leads?
Yeah.
Displaced families?
So that's a really good question. And I think it depends on your property, right? Like I have a studio and a 1 bedroom. Those are really not, most families have a 3-2, right? They're not going to, and they've got 2 dogs, sometimes a chicken or something, right? Or whatever their pets are.
Yeah.
So if you have a studio, 1-2 bedroom are great for sometimes digital nomads. I have some families, but so it depends on the kind of property. So those stay pretty booked. For insurance, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ways to market. I would say on a really basic level, you want to be in the right places, right? So the top places to be, really nutshell here, right, are Airbnb. If you are in a place where you're highly regulated, put minimum 30 days. I think people don't realize that. But it's kind of like it's like the search engine for short-term, mid-term rentals, right? So Airbnb, Zillow Rentals is a really good place to be.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just, when you're going through the listings, a lot of times now there's a little checkbox for furnished. I don't remember having seen that, a couple of years ago. So Airbnb, Zillow Rentals, and then Furnish Finder, it's known for being a traveling nurse website, but I get a lot of leads from temporary housing companies. So that's very high level. There's a lot of other places that you can list on. But that's the first step I would say is make sure you're on those sites.
Oh, interesting. So you get more leads from temporary housing companies through Furnish Finder, you're saying?
I get a mix, from Furnish Finder, Zillow, and I do my own outreach, right? As you get leads, a tip is like start building your own mailing list, right? Like just open a spreadsheet and then I'll send out weekly emails like, here's what I have available. And I'm always showing, hey, I'm a resource. If you have, and they're national, right? They get leads all over the country. So I'm always like, I'm in Portland. If you need a lead, if I can't fill it, I'm going to go out to my network and help find a property. So I'm a resource in that way.
Nice. Okay. Let's go to the marketing for a second. I want to know how you're acquiring these properties, and then we'll talk about what the different properties are. But walk me through some of the marketing you used to do versus the things you do now.
I mean, way back when it was very like 20% down. I didn't know anything about investing. I did know about leveraging equity, and I'm a big fan of leveraging equity to build your portfolio. But as far as marketing strategies, I've been a long time investor. I did a course and it was all about like door knocking and SMS and all this kind of spammy strategies. I think everything works. I think you have to do what feels right in your head and your heart. When my coach said that, right? If you don't like what marketing you're doing, you're not going to do it, and you have to market to get leads, right? So then I was on a coaching call and Carrot came up and I was like, what's that? Because my background is in marketing, specifically content marketing. So I was like, oh my God, I need that. So I love Carrot. I mean, I'd also do direct mail marketing, but Carrot is inbound leads. They're extremely nice. You're not harassing them, right? Which I think a lot of marketing it's like the distress burger, like they're divorced or they're, being foreclosed on, and they look bad on paper versus someone's typing into Google, right? They're coming to you, and it's a much different experience. So that's my favorite. My favorite lead is a carrot lead because there's motivation. You're not harassing them. It's a conversation. You can help them, and in a very like personal way, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you saying that, but it's true. It's like the motivation is really high because, like you said, they're going to Google and they're searching for you. So direct mail and inbound through Carrot, are those the two main things you got going?
I mean, I think word of mouth is an age-old thing, right? I try and put out there. I think I will say, there's a little bit of a sidebar, but we've been longtime investors, and housing is a very I don't know. It's like a hot topic. It's very loaded, and affordable housing is juice. We were always like extremely private about being landlords, right? And I'm just talking a couple properties, and then I eventually was like, I'm a good landlord. I'm going to talk about what I'm doing. So I think telling people what you do, that you buy fixers, and you're not like a jerky landlord. You care about people. I think that's another powerful way of getting referrals. And I think we're often it's just hard to like put it out there that we're an investor because it's a loaded term.
Yeah. Interesting. So, I want to dial in on the inbound marketing just a little bit. Are you doing, with Carrot, are you getting leads through SEO, and are you getting national leads? Like are you ranking for certain things?
Yeah, it's mostly kind of the area I'm in. I don't go out of state. I think there's two camps on that. I've kind of been like, I like the appreciation. We're in an expensive market. I like the appreciation. I like the rent income, right?
Well, heck yeah, you are. I used to live in Portland. There's a reason I don't anymore. There's
right?
one reason.
Yeah. So, and I think like anything, right? You have to optimize it and dial it in. I think what I love about it is it's truly, you could be on vacation or taking your kids to the park, and leads come in on their own. And again, they're coming to you. And I mean, I've gotten owner carry deals from that. I've gotten my most amazing flips from it. Like when I get a carrot lead, it's like hands down one of the best. And it's just very different than you cold calling someone and saying, hey, it looks like you should sell. And I get those calls all the time. There's some VA calling me saying, oh, have you thought about selling? Oh, no, like, you just called me, so maybe I'll sell. I don't know who responds to those calls,
Yeah. Yeah.
Not me, but
yeah, it definitely is a lot more churn and burn. It's a numbers game. It's a volume game at that point.
Completely. Yeah.
Okay. So we got your marketing dialed in. Anything you want to talk about on the direct mail? Anything you've seen that, are you just doing like the generic yellow postcard that a lot of people do? Or?
No, I mean, I do. This is going to sound a little bit intense, but it's actually a like invitation size envelope with a red pen. And I have an actual hand addresser that hand addresses the envelopes. And the letter is, it's, I hope no sellers are listening to this, it's essentially a very, very friendly template. Like, hey, I'm a local, I don't say investor. I'm a local, I think I say landlord. I manage our own properties. We're family run. I noticed you have a property at X address. If you've ever thought about selling, I would really love to talk. And it's hand signed, but it feels like your aunt sent you a letter, right? It is mass produced, but in a very kind of personalized way.
Are you getting, I feel like you'd get more referrals from those, even if they didn't convert. Like no one's going to take a generic direct mail piece, like an advertisement that showed up in their mailbox. But I feel like that is something I would hold on to, or at least lock into my brain and go, oh yeah, Shona, she was that gal. She's, that does this, So next time someone's looking, you're more likely to referral, I feel like.
Well, that is definitely true. But what I've experienced more is like, hey, this is so-and-so, and you sent me a letter a year ago and I saved it. And they put it in a file, and I've been to seller meetings where they have their property file, and there's the letter, and I'm like, oh my God, there's my letter. So yeah. It has like staying power because it feels personal, and it's not kind of like, hey, you should sell, right? So it's just, people really hang on to, right? It's a lot more work, but it definitely has staying power. And I've got like I got recently, my last purchase was an off-market duplex, and they were like, there was something about your letter that felt different. And they had an eviction, so they were getting kind of like spammed with all kinds of inquiries, right?
Interesting. Yeah, it is more work, but like any great marketing, like takes a lot more work, but that's the cost of standing out. I want to know, are you putting your Carrot website in the direct mail or no? Because I've heard two different trains of thought on that.
So That's a really good question. They're just completely different types of, they're very different avatars. Like the online searcher is someone that's really, they want to sell, right? They're pretty motivated. When I'm with direct mail, and I mean, all these buzzwords, right? Avatar, motivated lead. It's someone, what I'm doing is I'm searching for, non-owner occupied, tired landlords, right? They've owned it for
Yeah.
15 years. I'm looking for free and clear because they're going to have capital gains issues, right? And it feels like I just sent them one letter. Like it looks like I just sent them one letter. And if I show them like my other marketing, it feels like more of like, hey, I'm a home buyer versus me. I'm just a little mom and pop shop. And I think so it's just really different avatars, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make. Are these two separate brands altogether, or just a couple different marketing methods?
Well, and I did a course, right? I'm happy to share the way I kind of learned it. And it also makes sense is that it's not, and it goes kind of against like as a marketer, it's really not branded. It has my name, my last name. There's no business name on it because I'm trying to come, and I mean, I'm mom and pop. I'm not, I think online we present ourselves as we're this, we do all this volume and we do sometimes, but
Yeah.
with the letter, it's very much like, hey, I'm mom and pop. There's no business name. They can Google. I've had people listen to my podcast. So they can, and most people, I think, have a presence. People are going to find you, but if you come across as too polished, it's a different vibe and it doesn't feel as personal, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good point. And we, like you were saying, people will Google your name. Like, just throw out as a side note, like you need to, if you don't think you need a website or you're not doing any sort of SEO, you at least need to have a good website up and be ranking for your brand name and your personal name. People don't think about that because they might remember your name, but they don't remember the company name. So they're going to Google Brady house buyer, Oregon, things like that, or Shona Portland houses. Those are the types of things people are searching for, or your company name. So that's just something to kind of take note of. Okay, regulation. Do you see kind of what I'm seeing of like more areas just cracking down on short-term rental? You see it getting harder across the U.S.?
I do, and I think that's because it does affect neighborhoods, and there's this kind of heads and bed strategy. So the bigger the property, the more people, and there's more parties, and they're not part of the community, and it makes housing. Look, I don't know. It's a very loaded thing, but I think there's a perception that it's taking away housing, affordable housing. And these are not affordable houses, but that is the perception. So I think there is a lot of regulation, and you can, if you built your whole business on this model and then suddenly you're shut down, or I've had clients where their permit got pulled and they were just like, their business is gone. Right. So I think it's being at the mercy. I mean, there are ways, if you're grandfathered in, but it's definitely, you're kind of at the mercy of the local ordinances, right? So do your research, or if you're like in an HOA, sometimes they don't love, short-term rentals. So kind of do your research.
Yeah. Do you hear about a lot of people getting away with it like in gray areas where the county or the city is just not defined, or is it more jurisdictions is specifically saying no short-term rentals?
I think there's more cracking down on it. I don't know a lot about other areas. I think in general the trend is, and the other thing I think is, there's people are getting a little more burnt out, right? Like the numbers looked great, but maybe people aren't spending that kind of money, right? So there's just a trend with the economics of it, like. The best Airbnbs are pretty expensive nightly rates. So there's a general trend. And I think people the regulation, and they're expensive, right? So people aren't traveling like they used to. So it's kind of a combination.
What do you think in terms of volume, like when you were doing short-term rentals versus having midterms? Like, did you have to have 5, 10, 15 short terms for it to make sense versus maybe only a couple of midterms, Because I feel like Airbnb, if you're going to do it, you got to be doing a handful and have systems and process. Otherwise, it would just be a headache. I would guess.
Yeah, as far as doors go, kind of. Yeah. Well, I think, clearly I'm biased. I think the beautiful thing about the midterm strategy and the bigger size properties, which are more a little bit riskier, right? If you get that juicy insurance claim, right? Mm-hmm. You don't need that many of those to get pretty good cash flow, right? Like, so for example, right, I'll just throw out some numbers if you want.
Yeah, go for it. We love numbers and data.
So like, I have Okay, I'll give an example. Like I had a long-term rental. It was a, 3, 2.5, pretty standard, right? Long-term, it's a nicer property. And I don't know, I know you have a wide audience. This is a very expensive market, right? So
Yeah.
I was getting about 3,500 long-term, right? The tenants moved out and I was like, I have this thing I can talk about where I kind of test the market. I'm like, let me just test this, right? Let me see if I can go, midterm and furnish it. And I got someone for 7K a month, right? So that's double the cash flow. And then
Yeah,
I
that's
got,
crazy.
yeah. And then I just got an air, was for a client like 10K a month for a 5 bedroom, 2.5 bath, right? I mean, it's like really crazy numbers and we throw them out there, but you have to do the work, but it's small but mighty, I guess I would say with midterm. You don't need,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the insurance company is ready to and willing to pay for it. The insurance companies have deep pockets, and the displaced family is paying their premiums. It's like I don't think anyone's feeling bad for the insurance company.
Exactly. Right. And, sometimes it's a negotiation, right? They might come in and say, I want to stay a month. I'm like, it's just like in the long term, if you go month to month versus a lease, right? It's a very different price point. So yeah. And I do believe we are in the hospitality business, especially we're helping families, we're providing a service.
Yeah.
So I love that about it too. But yeah, no, they have deep pockets, and you can be like, "Hey, the house is worth this much," and they have the what you can kind of coach people to look at their policies and see like what their coverage is, because people don't often understand that. Like, who wants to look at their policy, right?
Right. Yeah. Nobody. Maybe when you start it, but yeah.
Right. So,
You're preaching to the choir. I used to have my insurance license in property and casualty and life and health, and like eventually I was like, this is too much. So I used to
okay.
work for farmers in a past life, and it's like it was kind of fun, but eventually I was like, this is not for me.
So the ALE kind of, but the additional living expenses, that probably makes total sense to you. That's where
it does, and the different percentages, and yeah. So, but it's a thing that like people don't really look at, like you're saying. That people just get the policy and write it. Let's talk about. I'm curious about turnover, but I also want to talk about design. So, like, how long are you going in between tenants in these?
So turnover, I mean, sometimes it can be really tight. I think it really, and I don't mean to be like evasive, it really depends on how you're marketing and what levers you're pulling and how proactive you are. I mean, sometimes I'll just have someone out in the next day, because I'm booking it. I would say if you're going to be, when you're underwriting, like always be really conservative. You want to have some kind of reserves. There is more vacancy, right? So I would say if you're going to be really conservative, maybe 20 to 25%. That's not my rate, but I don't want someone to go into this and think I'm going to get juicy leads all the time, right? There is space between bookings. And sometimes like nurses will come in on the 13th of the month and they're going to leave on the 13th, which kind of kills me, but I'm like, that's just the game, right? Because they have their contracts and they don't want to pay for a full month, right? And insurance, I mean, they literally will be like, my house, the pipes burst, I have a fire, I want to live in tomorrow, right? It's very fast, right? So you can often fill those gaps if you're marketing and positioning yourself correctly on the right places.
Okay, that makes sense. So as far as design, like you've been to Carrot Camp, so I've seen a couple pictures of some of your midterm rentals, and they look awesome. Like they just look really really classy. You have a background in some sort of design, right?
Graphic design.
In graphic design. Okay, I was wondering if it was interior design. It's not interior design. Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you need to put that much work into the midterm rentals, into the design and making them classy? Because if there's there's two camps of investors. Some people like take ownership of it and they want to beautify it and they want it to meet a certain standards. Then the other investor just laughs and is like, oh, you're wasting your time and money. Just do the bare minimum and send it. Do you feel like you need to, or you just like doing it that way?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Like, so look, even in my long-term rentals, I always took the stance, like I would upgrade fixtures and I think you're attracting a higher caliber tenant. I do things I would want, but I think with midterm, I think as humans, we want to be in nice spaces. I think it's really important. And I think going back to the regulations, as more Airbnb owners come into this market, right, the bar is getting higher, right? Like people want to be in nice places. And I think if we're going to charge a premium, like we have to provide nice places. With that being said, like my kind of thing is bougie on a budget, right? I want it to look nice.
I want a T-shirt that says that. That's my life. Yeah.
Right. That's like my favorite way. So I'm pretty thrifty. I think ordering online is great, but I have some local, like, I don't know, consignment thrifty shops where I'll find some accents. So I think it is really important. I think I like personally love it. I find it really fun. But if you don't hire someone, I think it's important. I don't think you have to have like an Instagram wall or wallpaper or all these things or pickleball courts or all these things that we see as these super trendy things. Because someone's living in that house. They're going to make meals. You want a well-stocked kitchen. You want a good bed, right? But you don't need to go to high-end furniture. So I think it's important, but I don't think you have to break the bank.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. That makes it. And it seems like that's one of the reasons you've been able to get that faster turnover and not have a problem filling them. Because I feel like that'd be my biggest fear if I'm going into multiple midterm rentals. Like, am I going to be able to turn them over fast enough?
Yeah. Yeah. And you have a cleaner or a carpet cleaner and generally, so also the other thing about just right long-term versus midterm, it's professionals. They haven't been staying there for years, right? Sometimes you walk in and you're like, were they even here, right? Sometimes it needs a deep clean, but you're kind of getting into their properties more than like a long-term could go a year or two, right? And there's just a lot more wear and tear, I think. So that's the other thing. Like you're seeing more things and yeah, but I can do it in a day. I mean, but I'm a little bit crazy. So.
That's awesome. Maybe you don't love it, but you can, and you do the turnaround. Okay. Well, I kind of want to wrap it up here and we'll also ask you if you have any other tidbits, but I'm curious, what would you say to someone getting started in midterm rentals? What's your advice for them? Most important things they got to be looking out for.
Yeah. I mean, I think knowing your market, knowing demand, kind of knowing who you're going after, right? If you have a 1-bedroom or a studio, you're probably going after traveling nurses, right? If you have a bigger property, it's going to take more time in marketing and, what kind of amenities you have. So kind of knowing who your audience is. I mean, one tip I would say is like, maybe you have a property and you're kind of like, and it also a lot of it goes back to mindset. You're going to have some vacancy. It feels a little scary, but you have to kind of believe in it and do the work and either figure it out or work with someone that knows what they're doing. Cause there is a lot of nuance to it. Right. But I think that, I think it's a really great model. And the other thing that if I can share this is when I'm kind of on the fence about it, say you have a long-term and you're like, I don't know, I will digitally stage it with AI staging, which is mind-blowingly good these days.
I just learned about that last week. A family member listed their house and I was like, what the heck? Why are there so many TVs in this house? Wild.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I do is I've done this quite a bit. I call my A/B test. I will list it on like, Furnish Finder Zillow as like furnished and in midterm. And then I will get a contract, book it, and then I'll go ahead and furnish it. So I think know your market. Yeah. And then you're not, cause it's an investment, right? And once you furnish something, you don't really want to unfurnish it. But I think any kind of urban market that has industry and, insurance leads, families are always going to need housing. So, but I think more risk, more reward, right? I guess I would say that you have to be comfortable with that.
Yeah. Okay. I like that. I probably should have asked this at the beginning, but, who do you feel like is like what kind of stage of investing career, what kind of personality, like who's a really good fit for midterm rentals? And maybe what markets do you see popping up as good opportunities too?
Yeah. I'm so focused on my own backyard, so I don't want to speak to but I think there are a lot of places to check demand, right? Like, you can go to Furnish Finder or you can go to like AirDNA and stuff and kind of do some market research to kind of check demand. But I think kind of investors, right? I think we all go into this for financial freedom and passive income and cash flow, right? I think it is a little more hands-on, but if you're looking to kind of have a smaller portfolio but add cash flows pretty well versus going straight into like multifamily, and it's just about the number of doors. With this model, you don't need as many doors. Yes, it's a little more work, but the cash flow, you could maybe meet your goals quicker with it with not as much effort as like short term. So someone that's kind of looking for that exit that is willing to put some elbow grease in, understands it, and you could probably reach your goals much quicker with this model than trying to get to 100 doors, right? Like all the numbers that are, I don't know, goals maybe not so realistic or we hear about in bigger pockets, but with this model, you can really get some pretty good cash flow with not too many doors. So that's what I love about it.
Yeah. And it's crazy. I mean, it's not because you're doing it, but it's just like 2 to 3x return on these is just That's awesome. It almost seems like a no-brainer. Like, why aren't more people going after it?
Yeah, like and I'd say, if you can dip your toe into it, like I've had duplexes where I did half midterm, half long term. So you're not like, you have a little bit of cash flow, right? You're kind of covered if you want to ease into it, right? And I think, look, and I think in a perfect world, a property perfectly should kind of support itself with long-term rent. That's not always possible, right? But that in a perfect world, you have all these exits and options, and you can also do like hybrid STR, MTR, right? That's not like just one model, right? You have options.
Are you talking about with one property, like switch back and forth, or
Yeah.
offering it as both?
So like if you're in a super destination, like waterfront, right, vacation-y spot, maybe summer is your super high season, like you're killing it in short term, go all in, and then you can transition to midterm in the slower season. So you're not really having to pick one niche.
Yeah, that makes sense. Huh, nice. Cool. Well, I appreciate it. This is, I was personally excited for this conversation because we're talking about before we record. I'm considering doing a detached ADU as midterm rental. I think that's one thing I don't hear investors talk about enough too, is like detached ADUs and how to milk a property for its highest and best use. I don't hear that as often. But anyways, I got a lot of value out of this. I'm super excited about it. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I did put out a lot of content. If anyone wants to reach out, it's my favorite topic. But it's just a really good. Yeah, I guess we all find our strategy and we think it's the best, right? So.
Yeah. What's your shameless plug? Where can people find you? You mentioned She's Got Assets, the podcast on Apple Podcasts.
Yes, there. I have a Facebook group. I try and put out a lot of content, a lot of resources. I also have a coaching program, how to kind of get up and running and do some of the marketing we talked about. But yeah, but if you Google like Shona Lepis or She's Got Assets, you can find all those things.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks, Shona. Awesome. Appreciate it. Everybody tuning in. Thanks for listening. If you have any feedback, you have any ideas, you like this episode, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or send me an email, brady@carrot.com. I'd love to talk, but otherwise, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.